Welcome to the News Hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin is playing up national unity 2 days after an abortive uprising by mercenaries. He hailed them as patriots in a televised statement.
But the statement did little to quiet the questions swirling about the Kremlin. They range from the Russian regime's stability to what happens next.
Russian President Vladimir Putin tonight addressed his nation for the first time since a short-lived rebellion marked the most significant threat to his 23-year rule. While thanking the mercenary forces for standing down, he had tough words for their leaders.
However, the organizers of the rebellion betrayed those who were lured into the crime. They lied to them, pushed them to shoot their own people. It was precisely this outcome, fratricide, that Russia's enemies wanted, both the neo-Nazis in Kiev and their Western masters.
Earlier today, President Joe Biden denied any U.S. role in the Wagner Group's short-lived rebellion against Russia.
We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
Meantime, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group chief whose forces seized a Russian city and marched toward Moscow, today said he acted to protect his fighters, not to overthrow Vladimir Putin.
In 24 hours, Wagner covered the same distance that the Russian forces could have covered on February 24th, 2022, to Kiev. If they had been as prepared as Wagner, the war could have been over in a day.
It was a feud between military leaders that festered into a mutiny, and the images were striking. Locals cheering the rebels as heroes. Columns of armed men meeting little opposition as they journeyed within 125 miles of Moscow. And panicked authorities tearing up roads leading into the city. Last seen on Saturday, Prigozhin was mobbed by jubilant crowds after striking a deal to avoid prosecution. Russia's defense ministry today released what appeared to be a show of unity. A video of its top minister, Sergei Shoigu, still with a job, at least for now. He was seen visiting troops in Ukraine, though it's unclear when the video was taken.
Shoigu! Gerasimov!
For months, Prigozhin had railed against corruption and inaction among Moscow's armed forces, whom he fought alongside in Ukraine.
We have a 70% shortage of ammunition.
A warlord known as Putin's chef for once running a catering company that fed the Kremlin, Prigozhin's private empire grew to span dozens of countries. Much of his force in Ukraine is made up of former convicts. They spent 8 months fighting to win control of Bakhmut in the war's bloodiest battle. His firm also provides private security services to leaders across Africa, where the UN accused it of conducting multiple massacres. Today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov assured Wagner-linked African nations that they still had Moscow's support.
Apart from relationships with Wagner, the Central African Republic and Mali have official governmental contacts with Russia. Following their appeal, several hundred Russian servicemen will continue to work in the Central African Republic as instructors.
While on Moscow's streets, an appearance of calm and order, as its mayor today canceled a terror alert. Some Russian residents say they're finally at ease.
I feel relief because there was no armed conflict. Apart from that, we didn't feel much panic. We survived far worse since 1985. We get used to everything.
Others appear to be unfazed.
I'm absolutely calm about the situation because everything was quite predictable. So when we are aware and constantly monitoring the news, everything could be predicted.
But it was far from quiet on Russia's front in Ukraine, as Kyiv's forces claimed to capture another village in what's proving to be a slow and grinding counteroffensive.
For additional perspective on the short-lived Russian rebellion and what comes next, we're joined by Alina Polyakova, President and CEO of the Center for European Policy Analysis. Thank you for being with us. As we just reported, the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said he called off the march on Moscow because he wanted to avoid Russian bloodshed. And what he had in mind was more of a protest demonstration than an attempted coup. Still, what does this suggest about Vladimir Putin's hold on power? How stable is his regime?
Well, what we witnessed over the last several days has been nothing short of extraordinary. And I think the most important thing we learned from this very strange sequence of events is that Putin is far weaker than we thought, and his regime is much more fragile than we thought. And I think this challenge by an armed military group marching towards Moscow. It's truly, truly extraordinary, as I said. It would be something akin to Blackwater, the U.S. Private security company, suddenly taking up arms in the middle of the Iraq War, for example, and marching on Washington. And the response from the Kremlin initially was very, very muted, and I think that surprised quite a few people.
In his speech this evening, Vladimir Putin addressed Wagner fighters, and he said that they could join the regular military, go home, or relocate to Belarus. It wasn't clear what this means for Prigozhin himself. Based on what you know of Yevgeny Prigozhin, will he truly just cede the floor, or will he regroup and wait for confrontation at a future date? I mean, he still has a significant amount of standing and influence.
Well, to be honest, we don't know a lot as to what's been happening behind the scenes. You know, this deal that Prigozhin supposedly struck, mediated by Belarus's dictator Lukashenko, where he's going to be in exile in Belarus, it just doesn't make a huge amount of sense. You know, prior to Putin's address today, Prigozhin put out his own voice message on his social media, basically sounding defiant and unapologetic and saying that everything they did was the right thing to do because it exposed the ineptitude of Russia's military operation in Ukraine. And then what we saw Putin say later today was, I think, a overcorrect because he looked very weak. And in this very short speech, Putin basically tried to present himself as a strongman, saying that they are traitors, this was a mutiny, and they will be dealt with. But I think the damage has already been done. And we don't know where Prigozhin is. We don't know if he's actually in Belarus. We don't know if Wagner is still loyal to him. But so far, I have not seen any evidence that Wagner is actually being dismantled or that its soldiers are, in fact, joining the formal Russian military command.
Officials across NATO member countries, one imagines, are scrambling right now to make sense of what's happening inside Russia ahead of the NATO summit next month. How do Putin's newly apparent vulnerabilities affect the containment strategy for Russia as it relates to the West and NATO countries?
I think we really need to be thinking about some serious contingency planning for a regime change in Russia. You know, prior to these events over the weekend, the assumption was that Putin was going to be there through the war and he was going to be there at the end of the war, and that there was really no real challenge to his power and to his authority. And I think we've seen something very, very different over these last few days. And I think that really speeds up the potential timeline for how the alliance needs to be thinking about a future Russia without Putin. And that may come through a coup attempt. This was not a coup attempt, as we now have learned, but it certainly opens the door for a possibility like this in the near term versus the very, very long term. And to my mind, the right approach from the allies is to really use the summit that's just happening in a little over 2 weeks now to double down on support for Ukraine, because there's a real strategic opportunity here to show through a sign of force that the U.S., Europe, we're not going anywhere, and we're going to outlast the Putin regime, because the Putin regime doesn't look like it's going to potentially last as long as we thought.
Alina Polyakova, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.